Hey, Rob, are you in
How
the
are
car
you?
riding? Are you riding somewhere? You're not driving?
Yeah, I was just down at a 3-day silence and solitude spiritual retreat down outside of Vegas. And I just literally landed 10 minutes ago and in the car with my wife. So I meant to
Wow.
jump on last night, but we ended up having a session at 5. And it's the first time I've gone to this. Um, they do a year-long, once a quarter, 3-day um, retreat. And so anyhow, yeah. So I didn't
Okay.
know quite what to expect.
Yeah. So now you get to talk. So you're going to get it all out and talk.
There was some talking. Yeah, there was some talking. The silence was primarily yesterday
Mm,
for about 6 hours. But it's started. It's a Christian. There's a Christian counseling center out of Vegas that the counselor my wife talks to, she and a couple of people from the church her husband was a pastor at kind of developed this a few years ago. And so anyhow, um, yeah, it was good. It was
okay.
good. So
Well, good. Glad to have you. And Victoria is joining us. So
okay.
this is perfect. We've got two for a role play, and I can use some examples and help you guys get started if you're up for that. So this week in the discussion question, you're talking about the ARE, which is an acronym for how to have what we call a hold me tight conversation. You'll get more on this in chapter 4, or excuse me, conversation 4. So the ARE is the acronym, and it stands for Are You There For Me? So when we're trying to connect with someone who is a significant other, specifically our spouses, and they want to know, are you listening to me? Are you there for me? Can I reach you? Are you going to hear me? Are you going to understand me? We use the acronym, Are You There For Me? So in the video, my wife is going to use the A, and she's going to say attuned. In the book, you're going to see the A is accessible. So either way, attuned or accessible, the idea is, are you available? Are you attuned? Are you accessible? So think of the A as available or accessible. The R then is responsive. In other words, if I'm going to talk to you, are you going to respond to me? And the E is engaged. While we're talking and we're responding to each other, are you engaged with me? So if you're on your screen and your wife's talking to you and she wants to have an ARE conversation, you got to put your phone down. You got to put your screen time away. Be available, responsive, and engaged. So in the question for the week, the discussion question, we want you to provide biblical support, biblical scriptural support for why it's good to be connected. And you might use the example of Moses when he sees the burning bush and he goes up there and God wants to have a dialogue with him. And God says, Moses, throw down your staff, get rid of what's in your hand, and listen to what I'm going to be saying to you. You can make up your own connection with the biblical story, or you can use some verses, but that's kind of what we want you to do if you haven't done your discussion question already. The article that you're going to be reading is Made to Measure, and that article is going to break down real clearly the 9 steps, which are broken into 3 stages of EFT. And so you'll learn how to identify stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And I think that article will be easier to read than listen to the music. a little bit more sequential and helpful. Jump in if you have any questions on this stuff, and then I'll open up for questions in a moment. The video that my wife did, the informational video, she talks about how to slow people down so they can be engaged in the ARE conversation, how to look for softer emotions. So when we talk about softer emotions, do you guys know what we're talking about? The secondary versus the primary emotion. So secondary might be I'm irritated, but the primary under that may be I'm afraid. I don't know what's being said. I don't know what's going on. So I'm acting irritable. I'm frustrated. You're seeing a lot of my anger or mad, but really under that, I'm afraid. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. And I can't talk to you out of my fear because I'm too engaged with this emotion, but you want to slow down, get deeper into my softer emotion, get to my fear, because if you can understand why I'm afraid you might leave me. I'm afraid you don't understand me. I'm afraid that I'm not seen or heard or a part of your life. Then you can get my fear. And then my irritation makes more sense. My irritation is a loud sound that means don't go away. I'm afraid you're going to leave me. And that's the only way I can express my fear, with irritation or frustration. But all my wife feels is that unpleasant energy, that unpleasant emotion. And that doesn't draw her closer to me. It actually pushes her away. So what we're doing in that, as she'll explain in the video, is to move people as a counselor. We're moving counselees out of their head into their heart. We're trying to get them to stop thinking and processing in the intellect and start speaking from the emotion, from the heart. And as we do that, then we learn that the only way to truly connect with someone is through our vulnerability. And that's the opposite of what the world says, especially to men. Men live in this weird, savage, kill or be killed world. It's unfortunate, but yet women also have their own kill or be killed world. So women and men both experience exactly the same thing emotionally. It just looks different or sounds different. It's nuanced differently. Okay? So any questions on either the article or the discussion question or the video so far? We're all good? Perfect. The midterm is due March the 26th. By now, I really hope you found a willing couple that will let you experiment with them and counsel them. Again, you can do an individual if you really feel you have to, or you don't feel comfortable yet with a couple, that's okay. But it's preferred to do a couple for the first one, and then the same couple I would suggest for the second one, because you know them a little better, you're more familiar with them, they're more familiar with you. So that would be my recommendation. So by now you should be getting a couple and be thinking about this negative cycle and how you're trying to identify it, because that's going to be the goal of the first video, is to get as far as you can into identifying the negative cycle and organizing it for them. And then the final will be that plus a little more. So again, we'll review that as we get closer to your final. So for the role play tonight, and I see we've got a one or two more that has joined us. That's good. Now we've got 4 of you, and so I hope guide each of you if you're comfortable. And if you're not comfortable in a role play, just say, hey, I'm not comfortable and I'd rather not do it. That's perfectly okay. But I'm looking at the screen, so if I can pair up Rob and Esther, and then Victoria and Billy, just keep that pairing, and then I'll be giving you some guidance as to what I want you to do. And I'll actually show it by modeling it with one of you. So we're still working on identifying the trigger and the emotion in the tempo. So as you're going through the process of counseling in the early stages, and you're working for the trigger and you're trying to find the emotion, you're going to be using stage 1 counseling skills. And in stage 1, primarily in the tango, this is a move 1. So I know there's a lot of moving parts. You have the 9 steps of the EFT map. In the 9 steps of the EFT map, you have 3 stages. Stage 1 is steps 1 through 4. Stage 2 is steps 5, 6, and 7. And stage 3 is steps 8 and 9. So the steps, the 9 steps, they are a big picture of what it looks like to drive from California to New York. Just think of that. That's the EFT map. So get a couple from being completely dysregulated all the way to where they can show love and touch and concern and safety and care. You're going to have to take them all the way across the country. And those 9 steps represent mile markers across the country. Now, you can go different routes. You can go 10 across through the lower New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, or you can take 40 on the upper part of those states. It doesn't matter which road you take, and it may be drastically different from another therapist. But again, keep in mind, you're going from California and New York. It will not work to go from California to Canada and stay there. That's not the EFT map. That may be cognitive behavioral therapy or some other methodology, but it's not EFT. So those 9 steps represent where you go. The mile markers along the way, think about driving from here across the desert to the Rockies, driving from the Rockies to the Mississippi River, driving from the Mississippi River to New York. Those are mile markers. So stage 1 would be from here to the Rockies. Stage 2 would be from the Rockies to the Mississippi River. Stage 3 would be from the Mississippi River to New York. So those stages just help you conceptualize where you are in the journey. The steps are specifically what you're doing along the way. But the car or the vehicle to go from here to New York is going to be the tango. That's super important to remember. The tango is what you do every session, all the time, throughout the journey. In every step, every stage, you're using the tango or something that is similar to the tango. And the tango is going to be the car, and the car is the vehicle that takes you from here to New York. And so in the car, you're going to be using 5 moves. The car represents 5 moves in the tango. And in these moves, they're, again, very specific what you're doing with the couple. This can also be done with an individual, but it's so much easier with a couple. So as you work through these 5 moves in the tango, the first one is to try to help see in the couple's relationship what the emotion is with one of the 2 people in the couple relationship. So as you start counseling in a session, wouldn't matter which session, whether you're in stage 1, 2, or 3, but you're starting a session, you're in the session, hey, how'd it go this week? What was going on? At this point in the beginning of the session, she may say, we're doing terrible. And he may say, oh, I thought we were doing pretty good. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. You hadn't been living in the same place I have. Oh, yeah. Okay, now they're off and running. At some point, you have to decide to work with one of them to start with. You've got to jump in someplace. We'll teach you more about how to choose to do that or what might help you. But once you decide who you're going to work with, then you begin looking for their emotion. In CBT, we looked for what they were thinking. In EFT, we're looking to see what they're feeling and experiencing. So let's say I'm working with him, and he's saying, Bill, you wouldn't believe it. Living with this woman is terrible. And I go, oh, slow down just a moment. So I'm sensing some high energy here. Tell me what's going on with you. And then he starts telling the story and how he feels bad and how he gets treated like the dog and this and that. And I go, whoa, that's so much. Can I just ask you to focus in on one thing? Right now, tell me what happened when you walked in the house. And he goes, as soon as I walked in the house, she asked me where I had been and why wasn't I home earlier? And I go, wow, that must have really triggered you. Okay, so I'm starting with the trigger, the T and the tempo. Then I say, tell me what happened. And he starts telling me. And as he's telling me, I'm listening to his story. And I'm going to be using what are called interventions to try to dig deeper into his emotion. Because remember, I want to cultivate that emotion. I want that emotion to come to the top. I want to activate it. I want to get it big or loud or soft or sad or whatever, because I want to help him organize his emotion in a way that his wife can see it. And then when I enact, in other words, when I move him to tell his wife what he was feeling, hopefully he can tell her in a soft, more vulnerable way his fear that when he walked in the house, she was going to judge him for being out late, condemn him, and he would feel like a failure. And when he feels like a failure, that fear is so big for him, he gets defensive and he gets loud and irritable. Now, if I can get him there where he can share that with his wife, then his wife's going to be able to process that and go, wow, I just thought you didn't want me to know where you had been or what you'd been doing. I get scared when you don't go home on time. You know, you've had a drinking problem, and sometimes you stay out and you drink with your buddies and you drink too much and you come home a little drunk, and that scares me when you do that. Now things are making sense. But to get there, I'm going to spend time working with him, primarily with him for at least 5, 8, 10 minutes to see if I get him to soften his emotion or he can share with her his vulnerability. Does this make sense so far, guys? Okay, please, if you have any questions, it'll be helpful for you to jump in. So don't be embarrassed to ask a question or stop me. Okay? So I'm working with him and I'm using different interventions. And interventions were introduced in chapter 4 and then chapter 5 of this book. And the primary interventions that we're going to teach you and have you practice are called mirroring, reflecting, validating, and evocative questioning. So in mirroring, when this guy's talking to me and he's telling me about coming home and being yelled at by his wife, I'm looking at him and I'm mirroring his tone of voice. I'm mirroring his hand movement. And I'm just letting him know I'm here. Wow. So you come home and you feel like, yeah. And I'm seeding that you feel like, and I'm wanting him to carry that on. So if he's real big, I'm going to get big. If he's medium, I'm going to get medium. If he's slow, I'm going to get slow, but I'm mirroring him. And by mirroring him, it gives him the sense that I'm safe and that what he sees in me can be what he sees in himself. And it's helpful just in the early processes when we're trying to make a connection with the client. We're trying to seek attunement and alignment with the client. That's mirroring. Just basically what you see them do, you do. He goes, yeah, and I got mad when I came home. Wow, you got mad when you came home. That's all it is. Just mirror that back. Seems kind of weird, and it is kind of weird, but it works. It's absolutely powerful. Because remember, we're trying to slow people down and get them to their vulnerable emotion. The second skill is reflecting. So if he goes, I don't like what she says to me, and I go, so you don't like what she says to you? I'm just reflecting that back. It's a little like mirroring, but instead of using face and tone and slowness or voice, I'm actually using the words and the phrases to reflect back, because I want him to keep talking about what he's feeling. So if I were to say, oh, well, tell me, what did she say when you came in? If I ask a question like that, where's he going to go? To his heart or his head? Yeah, his head, because he's got to stop, cognitively think what I asked him. Then he's got to phrase a response. I don't want him to do that. I want to go farther down, farther down, farther down. So by reflecting what he says, it's actually giving him the encouragement and the opportunity to keep talking. Then validating, that's pretty easy. Wow, that must be so hard for you. Wow, that's amazing you can do that. Gosh, I love that you're able to say that. Okay, just validating his experience, validating his emotion, validating him. And then the fourth is evocative questioning or evocative responses. Evocative means we're evoking something. We're trying to evoke something out of him. So I might say something like, wow, that's really painful. I would love to hear more about that. I'm evoking that pain. I'm saying to him, wow, that's really painful. I'm hearing his pain. Tell me more about that. Or when she said that, I can hear the pain, how that hit you. And I'm thinking that that pain leads you someplace really scary, where you're really afraid. Now I'm evoking fear. I'm evoking sadness. I'm planting that. I'm actually testing to see, is it fear? Can he recognize it? Is it sadness? What's that doing for him? So we're using these skills: mirror, reflect, validate, and evocation or evocating questions and responses to lead him deeper into his emotion. And in that, we're trying to deepen the trigger, and then we're trying to get to the emotion. And remember, when we try to get to emotion, we want to go to two places. We want to go to the feeling it in the body, to what that emotion does in the body. Does it make their chest hurt? Does it make their shoulders shrug? Does it make their head pound? Does their gut swirl? Do their bowels move? Do their fingers get tense? Is their leg bouncing or skipping or hopping? Where in the body is this emotion? And then what's a word or two that would describe this experience that you're having? And this is when we're trying to get them to use emotion words: irritation, anger, sadness, fear, frustration, bitterness, shame, guilt, anger, whatever it is, so they can start putting words to their experience. Okay? Questions? This is a lot. How many of you just feel like you're flooded, like this is too much? I can't follow it. Okay, thanks. Okay, good.
Dr. Still, could you tell me the last point, like fifth one?
The fourth one is the evocative questions or evocative responses, where you're trying to evoke in him a deepening of the emotion that he's experiencing.
Okay. Thank you.
So let me do this. This might be easier. Give me a volunteer. Who would like to volunteer for just a few minutes? Okay, Billy. Let me spend a few minutes with Billy. And this will be somewhat made up, Billy. You can go with it anywhere you want. It can be truth or fiction. It doesn't matter. But I'm gonna pretend like Billy's been really excited about something that happened in a not so good way. His wife is with him, but I'm choosing to work with him. And I'm going to show you a combination of some of these, and then we'll process what it looked like. So we'll take just 2 or 3 minutes. And that's kind of what I'd like each of you then to try yourself to see how it works. And then we can switch it. We've got about 20 minutes or so to try this. So let's jump in. So Billy, I hear lots of big stuff going on right there. Tell me a little bit more about what happened when you walked in the house.
It was just a lot of assuming, never letting me explain. Yeah, I couldn't get any words out of my mouth.
Yeah, a lot was happening, and you can't get the words out. She was assuming some things, and there's nothing that you could do to get out the justification or explanation. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I think what I just get I like to explain.
Yeah.
And my wife, and she would not let me. It's just fix it, yes or no, and that's it.
You want her to know what's going on with you. You want her to know you and what moves you and makes you do this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you get triggered when she just does the yes or no. And that kind of starts it off, that triggers it. And you really want her to know, you really want to get in there and push a little bit, and she doesn't, just yes or no.
Yeah, it's not even like I'm trying to trigger her to do so. It's just out of, as you know, like I'm not trying to sit there and prod her or poke her and do things to antagonize it. I'm just thinking in the moments of like this to sit and talk about it. Ask me something.
You don't want to trigger her. Yeah, you don't want to trigger her. You just want to say, ask me, let's talk about it. Yeah?
Yeah.
You just want her to get you.
And I don't even think it's trying to like dig for an emotion. It's just an interaction. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. It's more of like, allow me to explain, but also to dialogue about it. So you're not assuming I'm coming into the room because I had a facial expression.
Right.
And I may have just been hot or bothered. I mean, like physically like hot. And I get anxious or whatever. And not just thinking I'm mad.
Yeah, don't read me wrong. What you see is not mad. Let's talk about it. Ask some questions. Yeah, and then when that doesn't happen, you're triggered. And then underneath that trigger is this emotion. And tell me more about what's happening in your body now. What are you feeling in your body when you're triggered like that?
You actually just said it a second ago, and I'm trying to remember what you said, because it was actually how I felt.
You feel pressure in your chest.
Fear? Yeah. It's more of the fear of the unknown, and so I start having a fear of not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, and maybe your gut gets a little tense, or your chest gets tight, and you get a little pressure, and that's building.
I think anxiousness,
anxious,
some sort of
anxiety comes on. flowing
Mhm.
through your body and that anxiousness. Yeah. What would you name that
Jittery.
emotion? Jittery, anxious, too much caffeine. Name that for me. Find
Right.
some words to
Um,
name that emotion.
So this is transparent. It's always been so difficult for me to put words to things, and
Yeah.
so I'm still learning this, and even right now, trying to how would I put a word to that?
What's that
Oh,
emotion? Name that emotion.
there it was. It was shame. Okay, I think
Shame.
there's shame in it because
Okay.
the assuming, and I feel shameful, and then I get defensive
Wow. Yeah.
in that moment, right? So even in the moment of assuming something,
Mm-hmm.
and I always try to do the right thing, right? Or uh, my heart is to do the right thing, and even let me explain that's where it came from,
Yeah.
or
Right.
I'm not trying to, like I said, it would be like she feels I'm trying to poke or prod her to
Right.
respond, and I was like, no, I don't want that. Like I'm not trying to do that, and it's that shamefulness of like, am I doing that? Or it
Yeah.
brings some sort of a shame to it.
Yeah, you want her to know you and you're not trying to push your button. You just want her to
Yeah.
understand you and you don't want to feel any shame or brokenness. That makes
Mm-hmm.
so much sense. That
Yeah.
makes so much sense, Billy. Okay, let's time out
Yep.
here. That was beautiful, Billy. So, did you see the mirroring? I just kind of was with him. I wasn't taking my little notes. I'm there with him. And then the reflecting, wow, yeah. Did I ask him any questions in that? Maybe one when I asked him to identify the emotion. But did you hear me asking questions? If you did, then I wasn't doing it well. I shouldn't have asked any questions except when I shifted to trying to name the emotion. So I did the trigger. We got to the body, no questions. And then I shifted and said, okay, can you put a name to that emotion? Now I'm trying to get him to name it. So that took a question. And once you do that with someone and you get them to the primary emotion and you identify the fear, and Billy, that's probably more what it is, more fear than shame. Fear she's not going to get you, fear she's not going to understand you, fear she's going to think bad about you. Then that may kick in the shame and the sadness, but the fear is kind of running through that. She's so important to you. You love her so much. You want her to love you and like you as well. And that fear that she doesn't get you is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So once we can name the emotion, and then I can say something simple like, Billy, can you turn to her right now and tell her about this fear that you're feeling right now? And I get him to turn to her and talk about his vulnerable fear. Now she's brought into the conversation. Now she's going to be listening. She doesn't want his excuses and this and all that. And, she wants to cut and dry. But when he starts talking about how he loves her so much that he's afraid he's going to mess up and drive her away, and he's scared to death of being separated from her. When he can talk about that, she's listening. Most likely she's listening.
I do have a question in that. I was going to actually ask this in your wife's class yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
For me, for example, I don't know or really understood or seen that expressed what love was, right? So even now, I only do or understand from what I see in scripture, right? So it's still hard for me to grasp, like, do I really love? Like, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Like, what would that look like for even in a setting to where someone, it was like me, right? If the person I'm counseling still doesn't even know how to or understand or express love, and they're just kind of going by and doing what they think they're supposed to do in a marriage or in a relationship. And
Yeah.
I do this and I do this and I do this. That's what they do. You know, that's what a husband does.
Yeah.
But really understanding that what love is.
Yeah, Billy, that's such a big question. I'd
Yeah.
like to give you some context for that. It would be well beyond the scope of what we're doing now, though. It's a great question. But I think to cut it short, love is telling the person you love what happens to you when you're afraid that you're going to lose them. Because we all are bound to attachment. That is everything that everybody experiences, is the need to be attached. When we find a romantic attachment for life, and that's threatened, we do all kinds of crazy stuff. And most of it drives our loved one away. It doesn't draw them to us because we don't know how to share love in that vulnerable way. So in a way, Billy, this is what we're trying to do, is to communicate love through vulnerability in our fear. Beyond that, it's a really big question, but a great question. So let's try this. How did I pair you? Victoria and Billy? Who did I put with you? Okay, Victoria, Billy. Good. You're on the sides of my screen. So let's start. I wish I knew how to do breakout rooms right now. I don't want to experiment. Let me do this. Let's let Victoria and Billy take just 2 or 3 minutes. And Victoria, why don't you tell Billy a story about what's happening to you? Please feel free to make it up. We don't want you to feel vulnerable or exposed. But just start telling him something that happened, and you're already in session with her, Billy. You're the therapist, and see if you can listen to her telling her story and just try to mirror and reflect. Don't worry about the trigger. Don't worry about going to the emotion. Just see if you can show us how to mirror and reflect her, okay? Give that a try.
I speak the same story that I shared last week.
Okay.
Yeah. Where should I start? Begin. Hi, Billy. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I was quite upset about to my husband because he didn't really understand my feeling. And what happened is, actually, I did a congregational prayer on behalf of a group of people in front of many people, and then when I asked my husband if the prayer was okay, like good speed and tone of voice kind of thing, but he just kind of told me that, oh, you're so preachy and your prayer is too long and things like that. So I was so upset. Am I okay? Yeah.
Okay. So let's slow down a little bit there. So what I'm hearing is you had mentioned that you had this situation with your husband last week, and it was at a prayer or a Bible study, correct?
Yeah, on Sunday.
Okay.
So
On Sunday. Okay. And you had felt there was a lot there, and I missed it. I should have used that.
Yeah, Billy, just think of this. Just think of this, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so he said that about you.
Okay.
Just short phrases. You're trying to keep her going in that emotion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, keep going. Okay. You're doing okay.
All right. Wow, he said that. How'd you feel?
I felt first feeling was humiliation, and I thought, oh, my prayer was so miserable and so bad. So, other people could feel the same thing as it did. So that was the first feeling. And the second thing was like, he's so dumb in emotion. Like it doesn't really feel what other person can feel from what he said, right? It know how to engage in emotionally, something like that. So
Was it, is it all something he said, or was there other facial expressions or bodily expressions that he given off about that?
He said quite a kind of a dry way, but still, yeah, he made some facial expressions, and yeah, end up making me feel like I'm a dumb woman and something like that. Yeah.
Has this happened in the past at other
Okay, let's time out. I want to let them switch. But another example, Billy, was, wow, that must be really powerful when he says that, or I can feel your pain as you say that. Just keeping her with the emotional, because when we start asking questions, remember, they're going to jump right from the brain. And guys, this is the hardest thing I've ever tried to learn, okay? This is really hard to do. I taught CBT last semester as a piece of cake. CBT is nothing compared to this. This is so moving and just, wow. So expect to feel like a failure. I did for years. I still do sometimes. So that's okay. All right, let's shift. And Esther, you jump in and try to do Rob. So Rob, have you got something contentious or something explosive or something that you can really key up on? Have you got a thought or an idea?
I can try.
Okay, jump in.
Yeah, so we man, it had been a long day, and I came home, and my wife was just sitting there at the counter. And in fact, she was sitting at her computer, and I walked in, and it was just pretty quiet. There was kind of crickets, greeted by the dogs. But she just totally ignored me. And after the day I had, I kind of I just kind of snapped and just said, "Didn't you even see I came home?" And then she just turned her computer around and whipped around and said, "Well, don't you see I'm working on my school myself?" And so we just kind of started this loud conversation back and forth, and yeah, it was pretty powerful. We went from, I just kind of continued to dig in my feet about her ignoring me when I came home. And I threw my book bag down on the chair and went over and kind of loudly grabbed a cup out of the cabinet and, opened up the refrigerator and, grabbed some apple juice that was in there and poured it, and it overspilled a little bit because I was so angry. I kind of set that down and it splashed, and I just kind of left it there and walked away. And
I didn't know where to interrupt.
I know I was
being rude. Like,
I know.
let him get it out.
And what's interesting is every culture looks at interruption differently.
Okay.
And so many of my Asian students, when we did CBT, when I taught that you have to jump in, they're, oh, I can't. That's not my
God, I feel
culture,
so
especially a
uncomfortable.
woman and a man. So here's some things that you could do. Let me just do it with Rob. So keep doing, Rob, what you're doing, okay?
Yeah. So I just kind of grabbed my cup of apple juice and I went over to the kitchen table and I set it down. Probably, I set it down loud.
Yeah. Set it down loud. You're just feeling that. You just put that down. Yeah.
Yeah. And went over and grabbed my backpack that I had kind of thrown down to the side, and I brought it over and just kind of grabbed out my stuff.
Just threw it down, Rob. I'm hearing so much here. Wow.
Yeah.
Just slow it down for a moment. You've got so much. You're grabbing the cup, you're throwing it down. You got the backpack, you're throwing it down. There's so much happening with you. You're coming in the house, and now you're going through all of this. And then what happens?
And so then I sit down at the table, and kind of pull out my laptop and kind of, start working, and I'm frustrated. I'm sitting there
You're
irritated
frustrated,
and frustrated.
irritated. Let's focus on that. Frustrated and irritated. All that stuff doesn't matter. The cup, the backpack, where it was thrown, what you pulled out, but let's stay on the frustrated, the irritated. Now you've got something going on inside here. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about what's going on inside.
Yeah, some of it is probably two different things that are going on. One, I feel like here we go again,
Here we go
and
again.
and then I feel guilty because
Right.
I kind of initiate it, so I feel guilty.
Okay,
And then I
let's
also
stay with that guilty for a little bit. Okay. Okay, now time out here. So this is just kind of showing you, and this, trust me, this takes years of experience and practice and training. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in training, trying to just get this myself. And it's embarrassing when I'm trying to learn it and people are watching and I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I've been where you've been. It's okay. We got to try it. We got to jump in there.
Yeah, no, it was funny because I felt like, oh my gosh, I think I figured out the trigger and the emotion, but then I couldn't like get in there. So it was, I mean, I didn't say anything, but it was a great lesson.
Yeah, right. But you're getting the feel for what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is to help them focus on this. I don't care what they throw down. If they throw something down, there's something going on here, right? If you feel like someone's looking at you with contempt, something's going to happen here. And if you stay here and try to figure it out or fix it or whatever, you got to get here, understand it. Okay, I would love to flip and give you guys time to flip. We've got a couple of minutes. I've got a class to teach at 6. So we've got 15 minutes, let's say 12 minutes. Let's flip. Victoria, I'd love to give you 2 or 3 minutes with Billy, okay? If you want. Billy, do the same kind of thing you did with me. Say the same kinds of things. And then Victoria, you see if you can jump in there. Be bold. Jump in there. Okay, go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, it was, I came in, and like always, it's not always, but there's this feeling of assumptions, assuming, and I just start to get very bothered when she assumes, even though I may have a facial expression, I am not angry, mad, or upset. She just continued to insinuate, and then she got mad, and I got mad. We don't stay mad long, but we kept going back and forth, back and forth. And it.
Jump in, Victoria.
I ended up hitting the wall.
Wow, you hit the wall. Wow,
Yeah,
back and
yeah.
forth.
Wow.
Back.
Mm.
That's my
It's okay.
that's my struggle too. It's like, where do I
I know.
intervene?
I know. Hey, you guys are trying. You're doing great. Let's flip it. Let Rob give a chance. We got a minute or two. Rob, you do with Esther. Let's see how this works for you. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, so this happened actually a couple days ago. So our Dennis, my husband, loves having people over, which is amazing because I know that, we agreed when we got married, we want our house to be a safe haven and a place where people can come and feel like they're at home. But for me, it adds this mental pressure because I'm thinking, okay, well, if people are coming over, the bathroom's got to be clean. I have to have food in the fridge, and it's got to be at least presentable.
Yeah,
so
that is a lot of pressure to feel when
Mhm.
people come home. You feel like things have to be perfect as you're hosting them.
Yeah. And then it feels like though that's on me, like he just invites, but then he's just happy they're there. And then he doesn't recognize that it takes a lot of work and capacity,
That
for
has
me to be able to host people like that.
That has to be hard.
Yeah. And I think I think it just escalated because I had said, okay, you know, I just need a breather from people. And then on Monday, he invited people over again, even though Sunday we had just hosted people. And so then I just blew. Like, I remember because people were there, we couldn't even fight in front of people. So I called him and I was like, I told you that I'm tired.
So you didn't even feel like he heard you.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it felt
that's
like
too
I was just
harsh. Yeah.
ignored completely
Mhm.
instead
Okay,
of,
let's tell it here. That was good, Rob.
yeah.
She had so much energy going. And for you to raise that up a little bit and join her and get your arm like, yeah,
Okay.
wow. Short phrases,
Okay.
just short phrases, because if you do long phrases, you're distracting her from her story. But the short phrases are nudges to get her more toward the emotion, more
Okay.
into the emotion. Wow, I feel your pain. Wow, that's so scary. Wow, I bet that was surprising. Whoa, what did that feel like? Gosh. And all you're doing is trying to move them deeper and deeper and deeper into their emotion. And then once you start getting them, they slow down, they start to get a little teary, their sadness comes up, and now it's evident all this emotion is alive right in front of you. And you go, that's so scary. I wonder, can you turn to your husband and tell him how scary it is when people are coming over and the house is not ready? And she can go, and she can express that. And what seems like a simple thing, the bathroom wasn't clean, but people were coming over. That can be the worst experience for some people that we don't even understand. Okay, great job. Again, we're showing each other how hard this is. You're so brave for jumping in there. I posted a great practice video at the bottom of week 4 module. I want you to look at it between now and next week. I think it'll really be helpful. Talks about the negative cycle. It talks about the trigger. It's a role play example where you can go deeper with that. Okay. Okay. I got like a minute or two. Any quick questions before we go off?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Okay.
On the book, we have the 3rd edition, correct? On the 2nd edition, is there, because I have it on audio and it's a 2nd edition, is there a difference now since there is like a separation of like chapter 5 and the chapter 4?
I don't know, Billy. I only have the 3rd edition, but if you're not going to be tested on any of it, you're only trying to assimilate the information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when I taught CBT, we had a 2nd edition and a 3rd. It's a little different. Maybe the titles or headings might be different, but don't worry about the content. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I can just go right back to 3rd edition every time just to see if I missed anything from the audio.
Right. I know you like audio. I do too. Perfect, guys. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you next week. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.